Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Curious Competitor Podcast. I am your host, current New Jersey Devils defenseman, Connor Carrick. Today, I'm very excited to share our guest with you, Jana Webb. Jana is the founder of Joga, a three-dimensional movement system that combines the science of yoga with the biomechanics of sport, which is a fancy way of saying it's yoga for jocks. She is a very compassionate person, a very ambitious businesswoman. She is a single mother to a son playing in the GTHL, which I think will relate to a lot of parents that listen to the podcast. She is an extraordinary individual, one that I'm better for knowing, and now you do too. So thank you for joining us today. Let's do this. Jana, first off, I'm super excited. Thanks for coming on today. I think that there's, a lot of parts of you as a person that I'm super curious about. As an entrepreneur, as a leader in the fitness world, as a single mom, I think that you have a wealth of experience and a wealth of passion really to share. It comes through so clearly in our work together, definitely, on your social media channels and things like that. But tell us a little bit about your background, your origin story, because I don't know a ton about it. And I know we talked very briefly about, sort of some of the health scares and trials and tribulations you've had. And I think that, sharing your story will really equip someone with maybe the curiosity or the knowledge to be able to, make change in their own life. Whoever out there is listening that's having, trouble right now.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to frame this by, I was always one of these people when somebody said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I never quite knew the answer to that. And so my life has been these series of events that have led me to one thing, which is, forced me to change course and then led me to another opportunity. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. And so with where I'm at now, if I reverse engineer to how I got here, we need 10 hours, but as quickly as I can, what kind of spearheaded, because we are talking about where I am as an entrepreneur right now and what I've created in Joga started, almost 20 years ago. I was in a little car accident, and I was told at the time I had all this soft tissue damage, et cetera, et cetera. And I ended up in that, at that time I was actually working in marketing. So I was the main person for Corona Canada. So literally my job was to go around from bar to bar and take a Dos Equis out of somebody's hand and replace it with a Corona. That was my job. Pretty important stuff. Just kidding. Anyway, so it was in that time I got in the car accident. I was laid off my job because I couldn't do anything. And I was sitting on my couch in Calgary, and at the time I was watching Oprah, and she had these thing called aha moments. And I was like, well, this ain't mine. I've got no job. I can't move, all these things. And I was like, what do I really want to do with my life? And so growing up, I had always been an athlete. And so I was always the tomboy, the ponytail, playing every sport. My brothers both played hockey. I grew up in hockey rinks. But my best friend was a dancer, and she always came to school, and she was so beautiful and stoic. And, I was like, oh, I just wish I could be a dancer. But I could never dance because I had bow-legged legs. I had the weird body. They wanted to break my legs when I was little. I couldn't turn out. And while I was watching Oprah, she was talking about these aha moments. And I was like, you know what? I want to dance. I want to be a dancer. So at 24 years old, I auditioned for the Randolph Academy out here in Toronto, which is the triple threat Juilliard of Canada. And they're like, what's your experience? Do you dance? Do you sing? Do you act? What do you do? And I was like, no, none of the above.
yeah. But I'm here to try. I thought you guys praised effort around here. Now I got all of a sudden be qualified and skilled. What do you do? If you can't teach me to dance, if I already knew, I wouldn't come here.
Right? So I was that person. And so I basically begged them to let me in. And I was like, listen, I'm not coming to this school to be famous. I'm not, I'm here to just prove something to myself. So they accepted me into this private school on all these conditions. I had to do extra dance classes, extra this, extra that. Well, it was while I was in this school that I met this lady named Glenda Balkan, and she used to be Christine on Phantom of the Opera. Beautiful singer, amazing human being. And I had all these restrictions just because of this little car accident I was in. And she's like, something's wrong with your diaphragm. And so she started to do all these stretches with me. And I was like, oh, I feel like I was doing rehab. I was doing physio, chiro, acu, everything. And everything that she was doing with me made me feel better. And I was like, what is this? And she's like, it's yoga. And I was like, what's yoga? Like, this is a long time ago. Like, yoga was not trending. And that's kind of where my journey with yoga started. And I was that person at the time. I was a student. So I found like every studio in Toronto that offered like unlimited yoga for $20 for the week. And I'd like run around from studio to studio. And what happened while I was in this journey is I would go to the class and the same outcome would take place. And that would be, I would feel good mentally, but my body would hurt because I have a tight body. My hips are internally rotated. And, you know, I used to like try to sit in meditation, but like I'd be angry because I'm like, I can't sit cross-legged. And so all of these things, I hurt my back.
You relate to us hockey players.
Yes.
Now I know why we get along. Yeah.
Exactly. So I was like, why isn't there anything out there for bodies like mine? Like, I love this idea of this mental, like at that time in my life as an athlete, I wasn't taught about breath. I wasn't talking about meditation. And so those are the pieces of yoga that I really loved, but it was the physical part that I hated. I'm like, I suck at this. I'm used to being good at everything. Like, it hurts my body. And then came this adventure of me creating this thing called Joga, which has been my life's work over the last like 17 years.
Very cool. Mm-hmm. Very cool. And so in terms of, you went from enjoying yoga, particularly the mental component, to identifying some of the issues physically. How did you go about educating yourself and sort of equipping yourself with the knowledge needed to develop the modern day yoga? Hoagie, no, Bubba. Hoagie's yelling at me.
Yeah, no worries. You know, I just, one of my very first bosses taught me this, you know, a really important lesson. And he said, always surround yourself with people who know more than you. And so that's what I did. I surrounded myself. I knew there was an opportunity to work in sport. And I was like, this is where I want to work. This is where my passion lies. And so I just surrounded myself with people who knew way more than me, including the athletes themselves, about their sport. And just took this thing that I had, and it was literally trial and error. It was, you know, learning how to adapt this thing called yoga for this athletic body. So to be honest, it started with the athletes themselves, right? And I was like, did this make you feel better? Did this make you sleep better? Did this help you in the gym, etc.? To then moving all the way up to working with sports doctors and, you know, sitting in these rooms and ultrasound rooms when athletes would come in with injuries like ACL tears, and just understanding like, how did that happen and what would be the rehab or the prehab component to that type of injury. So just educating myself by surrounding myself with really smart people. And then honestly, just learn to do by doing. You know, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physiotherapist. I'm not all these things that you would think that you would need to be in my position. Mm-hmm. But there is a part at some point in your life where experience outlays. Outlays? Is that the word? Outweighs, the right word. Outweighs like books, like what you learn in a book, right? And so everything that
practical knowledge versus theoretical, right?
1000%. So that's, you know, what I do, and that's what works for me. And kind of like you, I'm just curious. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, let me
looking under every rock, trying to learn little hacks there, little proprioceptive cues and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. So along your entrepreneurial journey, I'm assuming your marketing background, once you decided to sort of launch, because now I know that you do train other coaches, you work with professional teams. Like, I would imagine if I were to set out with a fitness brand that my sort of training system and my ideological, training dream, whatever it might be, like, you would be a brand that I would look to see how you've done and how you've been able to grow and continue to really educate the educators.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it all comes back to the product. And again, understanding like who it is that I am selling my product to, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm working with the best athletes in the world, I understand that the best athletes in the world are offered many different types of training. And so you have to be really good at what you do. And to be really good at what you do, you have to do your due diligence, and you have to be doing it all of the time, right? And so I always say to people, this is all I do. For 17 years, I'm just trying to make my product the best product for the end user that I'm working with. And then the second piece of that, and we talk about it, is passion. I will never get tired of that feeling of walking into a locker room and training a team, or even if it's my son's team, a professional team, it doesn't matter. If there's a room of athletes in front of me, that passion lives in my belly. And when I can find other people who have that same passion or think they have that passion, and I can fill that space for them and give them a modality that could potentially kick open a door or open up an opportunity for them, that's the second driver for me. I remember once I got, one of my coaches got a job with the Calgary Flames, and she called me, and that for me was just awesome. Because that changes her whole career trajectory. That changes
the family's life, everything.
Everybody's life, right? So there's everything that I do involves passion and creating and trying to bring that passion out in other people, because I wake up every day very happy with what I'm doing. And so if I can curate that and help other people be inspired with what they do every single day, whether it's Joga, whatever it is, just get excited about something and do that.
I think that's interesting you say that, because I do, as a pro athlete, I do get a lot of these, hey, try this, or I got this product. And one of the things that I always sort of audit for or screen for with anybody that I want to work with, professionally, I've spent a lot of time trying to cultivate and create my career is I try to, is this person as curious and hungry to be their best as I am? And I try to ask that question of my agent. I try to ask it of the trainers that I work with, the nutritionist, my producer here, even, Colin Steingard, where I want to work. It's such a privilege in pro sport. I take it for granted that I get to come to a rink every day where you've got, 20 to 23 players, the coaching staff, the GM. There's such a hunger to be our best. And it's one of my favorite parts about being a pro athlete every day.
Yeah. And the first time I heard that from you, I think was you came on one of our certifications, and it was so perfect because you said to the coaches that we're developing and training, you said to them, I have opportunities to do everything all of the time, right? And so if you're going to take time out of your busy life, then you've done your due diligence as well, right? Like you've done your homework as the athlete, which to be honest, you don't always see, right? But in your case, you do. And, when you went off the call that day, I was like, I wish every athlete was as curious, did the same thing, because my whole thing is, if you're getting paid and this is your job as an athlete, why wouldn't you do everything in your power to invest in yourself to be the, you have this platform that,
and I grew up expecting that. Like I grew up as a fan of pro sport. I grew up, hard on my favorite athletes. I wanted them to be successful. I couldn't believe they made a bad pass. Now I'm the guy on TV getting the Twitter mention saying, hey, you suck. You didn't make that play tonight. But it's funny, like even, I live on the third floor of my building, and on the second floor, I have the gentleman. He's an older gentleman named Sid, and he'll see me all the time. He's out walking his dog, and I'll be, going down the stairs with my hockey bag and my gym bag and like my 6 water bottles because I'm going out from 8:30 a.m. till 5 p.m. when I'll come back. I got 2 meals in my cooler, and he'll be like, "Hey, you going to train today?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, Sid, going to train," and he'll say, all right, good. You better be. And I just love this, this guy that, is so, I don't know, fiery, I guess.
That's okay. It keeps you accountable though, right? Like when you have those, because you also, I assume as an athlete, get, in your day to day and get used to, this thing.
You do.
Right?
Well, you do. And what you purposely though, well, I feel like what the body needs is consistent challenge, right? Like the body will get the challenge, it'll adapt and integrate it into the nervous system of sort, and then you have a new challenge, right? And you could really apply this principle across, weight training for sure. That's an easy one because you're seeing the weight go up. The skill development side is a little bit harder, but there's very few things, whether it's how many times I golf in the summer to, if I'm working on a particular skating lesson, like if I put the hours in, my body will integrate it, will download it. The mind though enjoys, I think, variety. And I just try to plan for that, so that's where a Joga or, Eldoa is another training system that I've, integrate from time to time. That is a little bit of a different pace and coordination skill set, I guess, than what's totally I'm going to the gym and doing every single day. And I find that when I'm able to have some range in my repertoire, I don't get the mental staleness that you would. Now, I don't really have a recipe for, success there, like during a season. Like there's a lot of just suck it up days during a season. You're playing a lot of games.
Yeah.
You're on the road. I was even talking with, Lexi, my wife, the one day we were talking about, how these guys are doing with back-to-backs in the bubble and things like that for playoff games. If you're not traveling, like I was thinking like a back-to-back's totally doable. It's the day you get in at 3-4 in the morning and then you got to play the next day. That's tough.
Right.
But you do get, that's why I have so much respect for, I think, the athletes that I've looked up to and now I've had even an opportunity to play with, the guys that have been there forever. Like in Jersey, it's Travis Zajac and Andy Green, and Toronto is Patrick Marleau. Like, Patrick Marleau had played 1,650 whatever games, 1,700 games, and he's still taking 2 cold tubs a game, taking all his gear off, jumping in the cold tub after the first period, jumping in the cold tub after the second period, and going out there to play the game. And I just had such respect for someone that year in, year out just did it. He tried to be his best, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I understand that you did have a second accident though in your life.
I did.
And that presented some other unique challenges a little bit later. Let's talk about, if you're comfortable, let's talk a little bit about that today.
Yeah. And I'm at the stage now through a lot of work that I've been doing with, 10 different people in my toolbox. But, so just to give you some backstory in this, because again, I think it's important to understand the backstory. I had just finished filming Housewives. So I was on the show, the Toronto Housewives. Again, I chose to do that show. At first, when they reached out to me, I was like, what? Not a billionaire, pay everything. Like when they asked me like what my favorite shoes were, I was like Under Armour. And they're like, I was like, I do not fit this role. But then, I had trained Bethany Frankel years ago. I had some clients in the Hamptons and I had met her. And I always admired what she's done with her brand. And so she's like, you need to get your platform on like where millions of people can see it. And so when they phoned me to cast me for this show, I had that moment where it's like, oh my God, Jana, this would be a great marketing platform for your business. So I said yes to the show. So I had the best summer filming the show. It was awesome. We finished filming October 30th. And during the show, I thought it would be smart and strategic to open up a Joga studio in Yorkville. So I leased a bricks and mortar.
Yeah, it's a good area for it.
Yeah, so I leased a bricks and mortar, had no idea how I was going to pay for it. Like I was like, I'm going to bootstrap this business. And literally like 2 days later, I got a call from a Dominican baseball team. So I used to work with like where David Ortiz and Robinson Cano and Jose Bautista, like where that feeder team is in Dominican. I got a call from them to come train their baseball players. And it was for so many days for for an X amount of dollars, we'll pay you cash, like all these things. And I was like, well, I just leased this like $1 million space in Yorkville. So I should say yes to the job. I've never said yes to work, just to be clear, for money. That's not my driver. But in this case, I was like, I actually need money. Sometimes you need some cash flow. So I said yes and did the contract. And then literally on my way home, coming back to Alberta where am I? Sorry, Toronto. I was like driving and literally like just kind of texting all the coaches and doing my due diligence, saying like, thanks so much for having me. And then I was like, I'm just going to put my phone down and I'm going to actually look out at the ocean, because I hadn't seen Dominican at that point. I'd just been at the baseball field the entire time. So I just like put my phone down and I looked out to go look at the ocean. And then literally I remember just turning to look forward again. And there was a big red cement truck like right there. And so we were hit head on by a cement truck in the Dominican Republic at full speed on the highway. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and I think of all of the different pieces of this. I'm in a third world country. I don't speak the language. Right. And the only thing I remember is like that moment, like right before the truck hit me, and I saw an image of my son's face, and I was like, this is it. Like I'm done. Wow. And then I remember waking up and I was like, the first thought I had is I'm alive because I can hear my breath. And I was like, just breathe. And I took a breath, and it felt so painful to take a breath because I had broken my back and I was like, it was awful. And then I remember there was a bunch of Dominicans trying to help me, like they were trying to pull me out of the window. So in North America, this would have been a jaws of life situation where the firefighters were to come and like tore the car, and pulled you out safely. Yeah. But in this case, it was a bunch of locals trying to pull me out through the window because they thought the car was going to blow up because there was gas everywhere. And so I couldn't tell them how to stop doing this, even though I knew something was wrong with my back. And so, they finally got me out. I'm sure that caused more damage to my body, than everything. And then I don't remember getting to the hospital. I remember waking up in a hospital in Dominican and kind of understanding what had happened. And then again, don't remember anything to like maybe a day later where I woke up and I was just in, a neck brace and lying flat and in this room with like no familiar faces. Like it was awful. And to understand that I had broken my back and I was like, okay, I just need to get home. Like all I kept saying, I remember to the doctors and the nurses, like, okay, like great, I broke my back. So just get me home. Like just get me back to Canada. And it's not that easy because nobody wants to take responsibility for me at that point because I have a spinal injury. And so if I hit turbulence or anything like that, like where I broke my back, I could have been paralyzed. And so they wouldn't let me travel home. I had to stay there for a week. Finally, I got an air ambulance and was airlifted back to Canada a week later. And then that's kind of, I mean, obviously the first person, I just wanted to see my son and my mom and dad had flown out to see me. And that's where, it kind of hit me that I had been in a really serious car accident. Up until then, there were so many, like, I was on pain meds and, Dominican too, like you have to understand it's a totally different country. And if this accident would have happened in Canada, they would have treated me a lot differently than, so that week in Dominican probably caused a lot of, challenges for my rehab, in terms of just where their medicine is at and what they do. But what I'm learning to say and what I say now is like this accident has been a gift for two reasons. One is I look at it now as I was so strong going into that accident. Like my best friend was just killed last year in the exact same car accident and she died. And it is a testament to strength. Like she didn't work out, she didn't, and like that neck flexion, she broke her neck instantly and died. Whereas like I had that same neck flexion from getting hit at like 80 kilometers an hour. My neck didn't break because we teach about the neck strength in sport and in Joga and the core strength, like everything that we talk about with Joga, especially and just in sport is like that lower lumbar stability. And so I truly believe that because I was strong going into that accident is why I'm walking today. And this has changed. And the second piece, that's the physical part. I was like, okay, I'm good physical, yay, check mark, I'm walking, all these things. The long journey and the hardest part has been this brain piece. Like even talking to you, I have to concentrate so hard on getting my words out in the right order. There has been a lot of cognitive challenges. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, the concussion and this is now, I know my purpose and passion moving forward with athletes specifically. What I've been through on the concussion side, on the emotional side, like all of those things that you hear about are very true. I've been through the anger, the depression, like, you're just confused you're all of a sudden you're angry and you don't even know why. Like these are very real things that happened to me. And I spent the last 3.5 years trying to get better from them. And I am getting better, and I'm fascinated by the brain. So I just know moving forward, I don't know what that next chapter looks like, but I just know given my own mental health and what I've had to come over and change, I'm getting on the other side of it. And so I'm like, if I can do it now, I may have the tools to help somebody else. Right. Which is taking,
I think such a part of your nature. Like you do have an ability to, it's not like you're sitting here saying everything was rosy about the accident, but there are parts of it that can serve you moving forward and serve the people that you serve. And, I think that, even for your son playing hockey, you are now such a resource. If heaven forbid he were to have any issue, all of your athletes, now you have a Rolodex of doctors and information that you've tried that's at least a good initial pathway. And, it's interesting you say that about mentally trying to do your best even on the podcast here, something that may be very natural for a lot of people to just have an A-B conversation. But, the nervous system has a lot of things and the brain has a lot of things that it's taking care of all the time, right? Like it's trying to take care of our balance, it's trying to make sure our organs are functioning properly, or we're breathing. It's doing a lot for us that we're not always aware of. And I was working with this concussion doctor here in Chicago with the same purpose. I've definitely had bumps and bruises. I've never missed a game, but I've had my fair share of what I feel were, concussions while I was playing. And the fortunate part was I've never really been symptomatic thereafter where I've had issues, but I've definitely had like the moment of impact. I think something happened. I, saw some color kind of thing. And so anyway, I have this relationship with this Chicago concussion doc on purpose to kind of take a pulse every summer, get my brain scans done, trying, keep tabs on my, brain health from, his lens. And one of the things he was explaining to me was, Connor, the brain in general only has 100% of its capacity. And if there's injury or, dysfunction in a particular part, other parts will lend and take away from the job that they're supposed to be doing and help elsewhere. And he explained, he goes, this is why, for example, elderly people, he's like, it might be more difficult for them to be by the book open-minded, for example. He goes, this is why, everyone's got the story, grandma, grandpa, this is what they eat every day, this is what they do, this is who they are, and they're not changing.
Right.
He's like, it's very hard for the part of the brain that's responsible for open-mindedness and creative thought and for creating new neural pathways to function properly when, maybe this particular person just focused on balance and just putting one foot in front of the other. And for me, it really sort of shook me and made me think like, wow, I really need to take this seriously and have a plan of attack, have a fire escape if I were to ever have a serious concussion. Because it's something that anytime I play with someone or know somebody that's gone down this road, I make sure I take the time to try and learn ahead of time if I ever need to rely on this. Because it's amazing that it was like a made up injury for such a long time. It's amazing that it was something that people just played through because it is very real. Yeah,
it's very real. Yeah, and it's open, big part of what I do, what needs to be a part of my nature is empathy. And so I've had, I used to understand athletes just from the competitive side because my brothers had their issues with, coaching and hockey and all these things. And that helped me understand it. And then from my own lens, but now from this brain injury side, I remember going to train the Argos once and one of the football players came up to me and they're like, hey, Jay, can't do Joga today. I'm concussed. And I was like, suck it up, Buttercup. I had no idea. And now I'm like there's days like I can't even get out of bed. There was a big event here on Saturday night and I was like, 7:00, I'm like, I can't go. I'm having a day. Like I've been vomiting for 3.5 years. It's like a very real thing. I'm disoriented. I'm dizzy. I'm getting better, but and I've kind of been lying low about the injury as well because of my business. I'm also, it's hard to be vulnerable when you're running your company and, I'm a single mom, like there's really no days to be sick. Right. And so I think my injury is taking longer to heal because I haven't given myself the opportunity to take the time to heal because I can't, like the business has to run. This is my livelihood. William has to get to hockey, has to get to school, all these things. So I'm learning now how to cope in this new sphere. And and I want to tell everybody, but I can't because, I am right now. But there's a piece of it. And I respect you for doing so. Yeah.
I do because do you know Melissa Urban at all? Do you know the name?
I don't. No.
She's the CEO and founder of Whole30, which is like this, elimination diet. Like it was a big piece of Lexi and I's like health journey. But anyway, you remind me independently of her. She's this very strong, female businesswoman who is, you can tell she's very sharp. She's extremely competitive and precise with her business. She's got a great brand, and people are very loyal to her. She's aggressive on the marketing side but she's beyond authentic and very real. And I don't know, it's an energy thing, but you remind me of her. And I don't know her other than I follow her on Instagram, and we've direct messaged, like, saying what's up about a product or something that she likes, or a training modality that I was doing that she commented on. But she is documenting very similarly. She went through, I can't remember her accident, but she had a massive concussion. And she'll say,
you'll have to send me her name after, because I've already forgotten it.
I will. Yeah, I'll text it to you. But maybe someone to just know is going through something similar entrepreneurially, because I feel that I live in that world.
Mm-hmm.
I live in the, I'm like, my dog, unless I'm really hurt, you can't show it. I'm not going to take myself out of the lineup, even as guys were going into the bubble, it was like a serious discussion on, like NHLPA phone calls was, guys, don't play with COVID. Like, if you have it, you have to not play. And like, that's a serious thing we had to, discuss. And that's part of the podcast, is to help highlight the strength in integration and vulnerability, because it's not widely accepted. And I do feel we can get there, though, where people are not, it's hard enough to deal with the injury. It's hard enough to balance the business. It's hard enough to be a single mom. And then you have to balance gutting it out all the time on top of it. It's not easy. That's very difficult. And I respect you so much for going through it.
Thank you. And I feel, and again, back to the athlete, like, this is just the athlete. Like, there's no other way. Like, when you grew up, whatever the word is, competitively, and this is just all I know. It's just to get through it and to survive and to keep going. Right. And so there's no other way. For me, there's no other way than just to keep plowing. I'm just like a workhorse. I'm like, I'll just keep going until I get knocked down again. Yeah.
So in terms of healing yourself and with the business, what are your next goals and what have you been doing? What's been successful for you?
Yeah. So, this was supposed to be the year of Jana. I had this like epic tour lined up for the summer. I finally landed all these speaking opportunities at conferences globally that have been on my bucket list. And, I am, the Joga business is, kind of self-operational at that point. And then COVID, and then March 17th happens. And, me and my boyfriend and the kids, we were all planning to go to Mexico. So we had to cancel Mexico. We ended up going to the cottage, like winter camping. And I was like having this pity party. I was like, we can't travel. And I honestly thought it was going to last like a month or something. Yeah. And to be honest, it was Kevin from the New Jersey Devils who called me, and he was like, hey, is there any way you can train our players right now? Like, well, they can't do anything. And I was like, ding, 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 Jana Webb. This is your chance.
Another
This is your opportunity. Like,
it must be suspenseful to be you, knowing you're just waiting out there, just the way your life has been going. You're just waiting for the answers to drop from the sky. That's brilliant. It's got to be suspenseful being you.
Totally. And that was it. I was like, this is your opportunity, because for the first time in my life, like, it's been, as you know, being in the world of sport, it's a very competitive industry, and it's not been easy to get it to work with the pros. Like, it has not been. And I don't want to ever, like, anyone to ever think that. So when this opportunity happened, I was like, we've got all these athletes who don't have gyms, most of them, and who need training, and we can do it remotely. And so the last 6 months for me have been the best 6 months of my Joga life. I've worked with more athletes probably in the last 6 months than I have in my entire career, which is amazing. Like, that's all we've been doing. And so when you say what's new with Joga, it's kind of interesting because when I thought I was going to have this year of Jana, and now it's turned back to this year of Joga, but in just a different ecosystem. We're doing it online. Like before, I was flying in and out of New York, like, you know, trying, like getting on a 6:00 flight, like, you know, scooting my son off to school on his own, racing back to get him to practice. Like this was my daily grind for a very long time. And now we've got this thing called Zoom, and we've got this opportunity to be digital. Now I'm training like 10 teams a day. Budgets, there's no problem with the budgets. Like they're not paying for my flight, like all the fancy cars picking me, like all the things, right? Yeah. And I have more accessibility. So for me, I've never been a silver lining for an opportunity to see more athletes and to do more trainings. You know, I've certified more coaches than I ever have in the last 6 months. So yeah, it's been great. And I say that very humbly because last year I did have to close my Joga house because the business model wasn't working. I've been too sick to operate. I was too sick at the time to operate it. And that cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I was like, I went through my COVID last year. I'm like, I've had the financial stress. I've done all that. So for me, this has been a gift. And I'm now training people differently than I ever have. We're even looking into like artificial intelligence now and how to frame people's bodies so we can make them even better and have some tools for benchmarking and for assessments and things like that. So just, always trying to get better, right?
Always. And I think that is the fun in that. Like, how sad would you be if, you had one of these aha moments and someone, some spirit, from the grace of God said, Jana, you've done well. Congrats. This is it. You've peaked and just enjoy it for a bit. You've got nothing else to learn. You've learned all there is about Joga, the body, the body-brain connection, how to breathe properly with the diaphragm, and, business-wise, you've peaked. This is it. And that's something that I'll use sometimes to talk to myself like that, when I'm really frustrated, because there are times of great frustration. When you are someone who is constantly pursuing growth, there are, I don't know if the right word is plateaus or particular moments where, oh my God, you just feel like you're pounding sand. Like you're not progressing the way you need to. And it can be very frustrating for a competitive individual. Mm-hmm.
Well, I always say to myself, if I hear myself talk about Joga one more time, I'm like, okay, so what is Joga? Joga is but I was like, but every single time it comes out of my mouth, it's just there. Like I'm still just as passionate about it as I was the first time that I talked about it. So thank God. But I think, where, like you, I think I'm always like, there's more. Like, I know there's more, and I don't even know what that more is. It's just like when somebody said, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm like, I have no idea, but I'm just going to like, let life be as it is. And from life moments and experiences and what I learn, then the universe will figure out what's next for me. Like, I've never been that person who's like, I'm going to be this person in 5 years, or I'm going to be this person in 10 years. I'm just not that person, which I think scares a lot of people, and a lot of people are uncomfortable. Like, I don't have a paycheck. I have zero idea how I am making money this year. It's literally day to day. And for a lot of people, there's fear in that. Right. And I think for people like us who are curious, and I'll ask you this question next, but I love waking up next day to the feeling of like anything could happen today. Like words can just, like Kevin Morley just falls from the sky and says, hey, you got to train athletes, right? So with and this was my question for you in starting this podcast, because you said I could ask some questions if that's okay.
Ask away, yeah.
Is what was your inspiration? Because I think that you're a little bit different of an athlete than I've ever worked with before. So what was your inspiration, for becoming more curious about your own body and investing in your subconscious and conscious mind? And then my next question was, what led you to want to do this podcast and talk to people?
Well, gosh, there's a lot to that. And so where you were as a kid, where everyone's kind of asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? That's a question that's normal. You try to, stoke the psyche of a young boy or girl and prod their interest and get them to dream big. And, okay, well, if you want to be a pro athlete, well, this is kind of what pro athletes do. And you introduce them to the process to kind of eventually, hopefully get what they want. Well, I'm kind of there now where I am a pro athlete, but now the question I get is, well, what do you want to do when you're done? Connor, what do you want to do when you're done? It's like, I don't know. What do you think the next 15 years will look like? You got it all like I don't have it all figured out. So that was kind of in the back of my head. And that's been going on ever since I went pro. It's a question that as soon as you turn pro, it's asked all the time. I've got 1 year of school done. I went 1 year at the University of Michigan. I've got 30 credits done. I would consider going back if I was a little bit more clear on what I wanted to do next. That kind of led me to, I think it was about 2 years ago, my wife was telling me she had just started listening to podcasts pretty often. And Lexi's like, oh my God, I'm going to send you this podcast. I love this one today. I really think you'll connect with it. You need to listen to it. All right. Yeah. Whatever. And I think my answer was, Lexi, I've got enough hobbies. I've got enough habits I'm trying to, integrate right now. I'm good. I'm just trying to do my thing. And she's like, no, instead of, music in the car, it kind of replaces the reading habit that you're struggling to maintain. I was hooked. From the moment I listened to podcasts, it was pump up music to me. And I couldn't believe the diversity that was out there. If I wanted to learn about brain health, if I want to learn about gut health, if I wanted to learn about, I don't know, everything from the benefits of, barefoot style shoes to grounding to what I should eat to, war stories to get me through a tough time. I'd go listen to, a veteran talk about, being overseas in the Iraq war, while I'm nervous about my treadmill test tomorrow during my time with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm like, I got to run a trip, right?
Right.
And Jana, what I thought was so cool was now that I was starting to listen to these podcasts and I was starting to learn of these spectacular people, where I would feel so invigorated from them sharing their story. I kind of grew up, so I had this podcast love that was new and budding. And then I kind of had this, from hockey in the background. I consumed all the YouTube I could growing up, all the training videos. And I am very jealous of, the athlete growing up today with all the accessibility via social media, right? And so what I figured was, I want to participate in these conversations. There's people that look up to me in my community. I want to have these outstanding people that I look up to on my podcast, re-gift it, give it to them. I know I'll learn a ton in the process. Maybe it's media training to go into it someday. At a bare minimum, it's public speaking training, which I think is always a vital skill. You're training the ability to listen, frankly, which doesn't come naturally to me. I'm a heavy talker. I always have been. I remember the first time a neighborhood kid looked at me like I had 10 heads and just told me, you talk a lot, and he wasn't the first. And I still remember that day. So I figured I love the power of story. I think every individual has one. I used to think that, even when I was a kid, I was kind of a thoughtful kid, I guess. I don't know if I was deep or what, older than I was, but, I would, be driving, mom and dad would be driving me to the rink, and I would imagine all these cars passing by me and just think every single person has their own story. Every single person is living a reality I know nothing about. And the curiosity behind what a person, because honestly, before this conversation, you'd hinted on how we both know Sam Gibbs, and, I'm going to have him on the podcast at some point.
Awesome.
He talked about, kind of how you were recovering from these accidents. I was like, I don't really know much about that. I really appreciated our time in Joga. I really appreciated, the positivity you brought via your social media channel. But beyond that, I didn't know you. And so I think it's really cool is the podcast is this really reflective process for me. Most of the time, if I get my preparation right and, if I am able to listen and not botch, a key story that someone tells me, I'm able to really, give someone the joy of talking about themselves and going through the therapeutic reps that is going through your story with somebody, and sort of that process. And it's a long-winded answer. I don't know if it's necessarily what I want to do after hockey. I'm not sure it'll be successful or not to that rate. And I guess the final straw of it would really be just the ability to dream again. I liked the abundant nature. I liked the idea that I could talk to anybody at any time and it could become anything that I wanted. And, you know, I remember when I was a kid, you know, maybe someone would tell me, you know, hey, you know, the odds on being a pro athlete, and they were super low. Well, I imagine the odds on being a really successful podcaster and earning a living out of it are very low as well. But what I do know is I enjoy doing it, and that's a start. So maybe it buds into something of that nature. I don't totally know. But I know it's fun and I learn a lot, and I'm a better hockey player for it. So that serves me short-term and long-term. And that's the short answer.
Awesome. And perfect timing during COVID.
Well, that was kind of my idea. Was like, if I'm not going to, if I'm not going to do it now, I won't. Like, what excuse did you have, Connor? You're too busy. You're focused on the season. Well, you don't know when you're playing again, so you might as well do this. And honest to God, part of me took COVID as emotionally and personally as an experiment, similar to how you had your COVID last year and had to go through this financial struggle. I wanted to go through this like practice test of, okay, I'm going to retire someday. What if the league just in theory never came back? I'm still going to train and get after it and do all that. That's fun for me. That's not necessarily work. That's just a habit at this point. But what if? And so it's got a low barrier to entry. I've got some raw skills maybe to do it. I've got some raw contacts that can help me where I lack, you know, on the tech side and the strategy side, I guess, to keep it, you know, more clear and concise and compelling week in, week out. I'm still learning that. But why not? Like if not during COVID.
Absolutely. When else? Not on
when
the
else?
road. Yeah.
When else?
No, and I was excited too, because to be quite transparent, this is the first interview I've ever done from a sports person. Like I, you know, which is kind of interesting. I've done all these different interviews and, you know, but I was so excited to do this one because my athletes have never, they just think I'm this yoga person that comes in and like, I probably just stepped on a mat one day and I was like, oh, I want to work with athletes. And, you know, I want people to know that there's this story and where it came from and where the challenges have been and how hard it's been. You know, it's not, it's not been easy. But I just know that I'm making impact and change every single day. And that, like, you took the time to get to know me, which a lot of people don't. And so thank you for that. It means the world to me. You know, especially being a female in an industry where you're already, and it is what it is. You have blonde hair, you're trying to work in hockey or football or whatever. There's already a stigma attached to that. So that's already an obstacle, right? And then trying to implement a modality that some people see, especially the old gray-haired men that make some big decisions in sport, to implement a modality that seems so foreign and like not a part of their ecosystem, right? So there's been challenges, and yet I keep going and I keep trying, right? And why, right? Why? Because to be quite honest, like when I saw James Harden just go through that series of playoffs, and to know that we've had a piece of his, not all of his success, we talked about this, but if we've been a little piece of his training, right, over the last year. Yeah. And when I watch him on the court, I'm more invested in him now as a human, not as an athlete, as a human, right? Because we've had some interaction. Like, he does Joga, which, yeah, there's the physical pieces of Joga too, but there's this huge mental and emotional piece to Joga that these athletes at that level, that caliber need. And we unveil, I like to look at humans as these onions, and like there's all this surface stuff at first, right? It's like, oh, do the thing or whatever. But I'm like, as I gain trust and as I gain respect with these athletes, I get to the core of who they are as human beings. And those are the people that we're helping, right? And those are the people that I look at the court. They're not an asset to me. I'm not the owner. I have no investment in that team at all. I'm not even a part of the organization. I'm just an outsider coming in and trying to make that human better. And that involves many different things, right?
And I think that was kind of the social element of trying to start the podcast, was particularly in Dallas. I got traded played for like a couple weeks and I broke my leg. I was out, I think it was 11 or 12 weeks. I can't remember now. And, it was very lonely. I was kind of like the chronic new guy where, I was new when I got there. When you're there after a couple of weeks, you're still kind of new. I didn't go through training camp with the team. It was after the full training camp with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, my wife and I hadn't had a ton of time. We didn't really know anybody down in Dallas. And, beforehand, we didn't have any like pre-existing friends on the team and we didn't have any family members. So it was like I kind of was just there to break my leg and hang out. And, I was a little lonely at times and the team was on the road a ton. I don't know what happened with the schedule, but I felt like the first 6 weeks, like they were totally gone when I got hurt. And I think that there was a loneliness component, and there can be to, pro hockey. I have seen it, particularly you're on the road a lot. Also lack of diversity in conversation, I think was something I wanted. Every day you come to the rink, it's talking about winning the next hockey game. And that's great. And there is the locker room joking around and that's great too. But I get paid to be somebody at the rink, to be the player that I am. There's a persona that comes with it. It's not as vulnerable as I am here, I am a little bit of the teammate, notice somebody's down and say, hey, what's up? And kind of stoke the conversation that way. And I will. And then I do think being a professional athlete, I wake up, you can tell you have such a pride with the service and the improvement that you're able to provide physically and mentally with Joga for people. And it's you can tell it's at the core. That's what keeps you going. I wake up every day and I'm worried about one thing, one person, and it's me, and it begins with me and it ends with me. Being a pro athlete is inherently, I talked about this a lot with on the Jana Webb podcast, it's very selfish. And that's great. You have to be, you're supposed to be, you've got only one real crack at this. You've only got one career. When you're done, you're done. And then you can go on and, take up some of the range of different interests that you have. And that's what, guys do. But I felt that I had time for it. Our practices are normally done at, 1, 2 o'clock, we're there at, 9, 10, whatever. I figured there's enough time for it in a day. You get one off day a month. At least we did, under the normal season last year. I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, if I wanted to start this podcast and if I got ahead of, if I pre-recorded and got some of them done, like maybe for training camp, so I didn't have to do it during training camp where I don't know the schedule. And then during the season, if I just scheduled like 1 a.m, you get one off day a week. So if you do one a week, it should be pretty sustainable. And that's where I finally decided to, go out there and do this, because I do know for whatever reason, it's more common in other sports. You see other athletes involved in other investments and, financially, mentally. And I get it. Maybe the money's just not there with hockey. Maybe the branding side just isn't necessarily there like what might be in basketball or football. But I figured, why not? I could definitely start here. And I got to say, like, I think it's cool checking the viewership every month. You want to see, who, what the numbers are and who's doing well. We're having conversations around, being able to have presenting sponsors and that kind of thing where, Colin and I work with Brand Ford is the name of the branding company that I really love, with Patty Hubbard and Stephanie Martin. And we're very careful about who we even talk to about, on that side, but, really for me, it's been what really gets me fired up is when I have like a close friend, or like I have 2 younger brothers that'll text me, hey, this is what I really got out of that in particular. Like, for example, we have a really close family friend, a kid named Tom Abrams. And he's just graduated business school from University of Illinois. And he's getting ready to like go into the corporate world, and really start grinding it out. And I know from other friends that have gone this similar route, like, some of them struggle with purpose. Some of them struggle with passion. They don't love it. A lot of them struggle with their health. They still drink like they were in college and they're not eating good, because you never eat good when you're drinking.
Right.
And like Tommy, for example, texted me and said, hey, the Robin Sharma podcast, where we really echoed, the ability to work very hard, but rest very deeply, and how important that was. like that really fires me up. And you just never know when that might come out of a guest, the particular part. Like we don't know. We're definitely enjoying this conversation.
Yeah.
But we don't know the particular part that's going to connect with who's listening. And that's it's all fun, but that's really fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, hopefully. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully the words fall on some listening ears.
Yeah.
I'm like, I've got a lot more to say if we've got time.
We do. I think, what are we, 40 minutes through? Yeah, let's keep her going. What other questions you got?
So I was, I'm looking at my notes. My one question was about your scar.
Oh, this whole thing?
Okay, so here's I don't Google people, by the way. I'm like, I just want to learn who you are from this conversation. I could look up your name and probably find out a bunch of information, but that's what I choose not to do. So yeah, that guy. What's that from?
This was on, I jacked my pinky up this past year.
Okay.
And I had surgery on my pinky. So I was out, I don't know, what was it, a month? And I went to come back and I went on a conditioning stint with Binghamton in the minors. And, it's always scary. Every time you get hurt as a player where I'm at in the NHL, where I've been, leash wise, there's not a lot there. It's very hard just with the pace of the NHL game to miss any time at all, let alone, when you're usually fighting for a lineup spot, as it is. And so I went down on a conditioning stint. I felt I was playing pretty well. And all of a sudden, in the second period, I go stick on puck, and the thing comes up and jacks me in the face, right? And similar. You get hit in the face. It definitely hurt a lot. I went down. The ref actually, I kind of like fell after there was like a dog pile in front of the net, and I got up, and the ref looks at me and goes, "Oh my god!" I'm like, that's not a good sign. I'm like, that can't be good. So I skate down the other end of the rink because it was during the second period. We're in Hartford, and I'm going to open the door, and I can see myself in the reflection. And I'm like, this is not good. So anyway, it was I got 18 zips this last year, and was all sore.
So it's fresh.
It's fresh. Yeah, it happened. What was it, January?
Wow.
But I got all sore from like the fascia and the tissue like in my scalp and in my head. From like all the jaw muscles that like kind of reach up. So I was like, I don't think I had a concussion from that one, but I definitely was like my fascia around my head is sore. Like, not like a headache. It was really, really weird. So I've been trying to, Lindsey Vaughn actually got me, name drop. Sorry about that. But Lindsey Vaughn actually got me like this scar cream and gave it to PK to give to me. And I've been trying to use it. I probably should have been through it by now. My wife is always asking me hey, can you take care of that? And I'm trying, but it's not easy. It's
a big one.
Now I kind of lead with it. And, it's kind of a sign of, your battle scars. You earn them and you get to keep them when you're done with them,
Mm-hmm. So my next question was about because I have a 12-year-old who's going through the GTHL right now. Did you grow up in Canada or the US?
Chicago. Chicago. But I know the GTHL well. Yeah, we used to go up there and play all we could.
And so, these kids, like the coaching, I don't know how much has changed in the last 10 to 15 years, but, did you always play AAA, double, like were you pushed? Did your parents push you? Were you your driver, or did you have somebody drive you through,
This is a great question. And mentally, I try to go back and remember it too. So my mom was more so very involved on the homework side. All three, we have three boys in my family. My middle brother's name is Blake. My youngest is Hunter. We're all good students. I was particularly really ambitious and always got my stuff done for that because I learned at like a very young age, in order to do what you want, you have to do some things that you may not love as much. Like that was, if you want to play hockey, you got to do good in school. That was a conversation with mom. Dad supported mom and was also my dad was a very big dreamer. And the conversation in our home was always, someone's going to play in the NHL. Why not you? And I would say that my dad definitely pushed me as a kid, but there were conversations that we had as a family that were, okay, Connor, I did play AAA growing up. I started at 9. I played up with the 10-year-olds. And then all the way through till I was 16 and eventually went and played junior hockey. But, it's expensive to play a hockey at the AAA level. from a time commitment wise and from the travel. So my dad, every year we just have a conversation of like, hey, I could join the local country club, but I'm not because I love your hockey but I need an effort. And my dad held me to it. He held me accountable. There was definitely a lot of conversations around effort. And when it was there, my dad was, passionately very happy for me. And with me. And when it wasn't there, my dad was like, we had this conversation and you have to own up to what is going on here. Cause we're giving up a lot. We're sacrificing a lot as a family for this. And maybe the conversation was a little serious, when I look back for some people, like I know, other parents might have said things to my dad at times that he was being intense or whatever, but like I had an appetite for it. I don't know why. I was always a kid. We'd be playing Ghost in the Graveyard at a friend's house, and then I would like sneak off, and because he had an unfinished base, and I'd be like shooting pucks in my buddy's basement, like while everyone at the team party was playing. I always, and it's weird that it was hockey because I played baseball at a pretty high level. Like we had a quite a few Division I commitments, and a couple kids get drafted and stuff, and I took it seriously, but it was a game. Baseball was a game for me. Hockey was, I'm going to make it. I have to make it. And I don't know why that was different. I don't. As far as kids today, I think that, if I were to have a child in hockey, I don't know how I would implement. I used to give advice to play multiple sports. I think that's still my advice. I know how time intensive now the summers and that are. And I remember missing some of those tournaments because I was really the age where that really started to get popular was the summer select tournaments and things like that. I still think developing the athlete long-term is good, but I mean, you know how competitive it is. You got to stay in the fight too, so you can continue to get the ice time and continue to get the better coaching at the better levels. And, you're in the mecca of it up there in Toronto. I mean, it's extremely competitive. There's hockey everywhere. And, I don't know, maybe the final part of it, I'd say, is of even starting this podcast and where those two questions are linked was I did want to talk a little bit about mental health and fitness and wellness and resiliency and introduce this as part of a conversation in certain homes. My hope was, if I had young listeners, great. Some of this conversation might be, a little bit mature, and dry, but definitely for parents out there, for youth parents that, oh, wow, like, Connor is talking about the importance of mental resiliency for athletic performance at the professional level. Maybe this is something that is a conversation we should have in our home. So, my dad definitely pushed me. My mom definitely pushed me because she wanted, we all wanted to make my dad happy. And we loved it though. Hockey's given me so much. And my brothers and I, we all kind of bonded over it growing up. And I was that kid. I was really serious about it. And I was extremely competitive.
I get it. But that's just it, and I think people think, you see successful people, like some people might look at me and you'll be like, oh, he just made the NHL, like he's had it easy, right? Or she's got, whatever people think or judge or see people as who are frame themselves as successful. But like in that, and this is why podcasts are awesome, you start to learn there's a common thread here, and there's sacrifice, there's like wanting it more, there's all these little underlying things that I think, especially now, kids need to learn, right? Like you're not going to sit down and play NHL on Xbox and be a good hockey player, right? Like you actually, you have to take sacrifices. You have to miss that party. Like all the kids are going to a school party and you're not. You're going to team practice probably, right? And so,
and I was that kid. Like I had a lot of advantages. I had, access to ice that was close to my home. You can't say that about a lot of the world in terms of access to ice rinks and that. I played with a kid named David Gust, whose dad had owned the rink. So, we had, some better ice time slots and access. We had like a slot on Wednesdays that was extra that I was, lucky enough to be invited to. But I definitely, looking back, like all those cliche, work hard, study the game, you don't get to go to that party. I downloaded that and I did everything I was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
I really did. I took the book that, elders before me or, older players that had given me advice, and I went to town with it. And I didn't go to that party. You can ask my wife. Like, I was kind of a nerdy, kid in high school. I was a hockey nerd. That's how I identify it. The only guy that I ever, really, I feel like totally fit that word even better than I did was like when I was with Jason Spezza, for example, down in Dallas. I was like, this guy, this guy's a hockey nerd. He's a special hockey nerd. This guy, he's like, 38 years old, not missing an optional pregame skate, not one time. And,
But I think that's such important advice though, because I really think that people just think it's easy, and like, it's not. It's not easy. There, it can be, but I think like to get to where it is that you want to go or where you see yourself going, it's not easy, and you've got to, reverse engineer it and, figure it out, right? Figure out what's more important.
And there's levels to it. It's something I even had to go through in my pro career. So, for example, when I used to grow up and go to a game, like my thought was, I am going to dominate the game tonight. I'm going to be the reason, we win. Well, there's been times in my career where, your ice time's sitting at 8-9 minutes. Well, you're not going to dominate the game at 8-9 minutes as a D-man. Like Connor, you have to use a different mental skill set just to get to 10 minutes. And then when you get to 10 minutes, you can get to 12 minutes. And there's been constantly like a thought process around, how do I play? What do they actually pay me to do out there? What am I not doing enough of, strengths and weaknesses wise? You really do have to be talented for sure. And there's a lot of hard work that goes into cultivating that talent. But at the NHL level, you got to be clever. You've got to know what a locker room needs. You got to know what a team needs. You got to know what to say at the right time. You got to know what not to say at the right time or do. This extends into play as well. And you've got to be crafty. And that's something that, like, looking back over the course of my career, that you want to play the game in a way that you're proud of when you're all done. I can definitely look back and go, I've been gritty. Like, I have been crafty every step of the way to stay in the NHL, to grow to the point that I have, and still not satisfied. I still think my best hockey is ahead of me.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. I really do.
That's exciting.
How about in terms of what I do or don't show on the podcast? What would you like to see as a mother of a young hockey player? Would you want to see more of? What types of conversations would you like to have on here?
Well, I think it's important, like you talked about mental resilience. Beyond hockey, like these kids are managing stress from school, like social media stress, technology. Like the world is just moving so fast that I really feel like their nervous system can't handle everything. And so I truly feel it should be a part of a curriculum of some sort in school. It's just mental resilience or mental something, because at some point it's just, the frequency is just, it's too much, right? Their circuits can't handle this frequency. So I think we need to, and this is, now moving into youth sport, like that's what we're talking about, where, like, here's your deep belly breath, take it. You can take it before an exam at school. You can take it if you can't sleep at night. You can take it if you're nervous because your coach is being an asshole and called you, and this is happening in the GTHL. And, I've kind of put my foot down and I was like, I'm choosing not to let my kid be coached by somebody like that. Cause there are some coaches out there that will just ruin these children's minds. Right. So mental resilience, I think there needs to be conversation on what kind of coaching should be accepted. These are kids, right? And the way that some of these kids are spoken to, I'm just like, this is just not right. And so there needs to be better training for coaches and who we let coach our kids. There needs to be a better gatekeeper for that.
There's a particular point that I completely agree with, was in junior hockey in particular. A lot of these junior coaches, I was fortunate to have some ones that I really liked. I was fortunate to have some ones I really did not. And I remember the massive jump in terms of the way we were talked to and treated as players from when I was 15. You're a youth player.
Mm-hmm.
When I went and I was 16, playing at the U.S. development team, I was talked to like a pro overnight.
Right.
And like 16 years old, when I look back, like I was still, you're a young man then. You can handle some challenges, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
You're 2 years away from being able to like sign off to go to war if you want
Right. Right.
But it was just so drastically different. And there's no, if I look back, I'm like, I think our coach at the time thought he was coaching pros. Like, and now there's a whole separate conversation of how you should, you know, maybe talk to pros, but you know, at the end of the day, in a results, you know, oriented business like hockey with winning, you know, there's going to be things that stick around if they, you know, tend to work. And that was something where on the mental side, that's where I really wanted to take responsibility, was because I realized with some of these tough, like, you know, junior conversations with coaches that I didn't get to control the coach. I don't get to coach the coach. I just can coach myself. And I don't know what they're going to do. You know, we had a pretty volatile, you know, coach at the time. So I'm like, I really don't know what this guy's going to do at any given moment.
Yeah.
And I have to be prepared if he's going to flip out, you know, condescend, sit me during an international tournament, whatever. I'm in control of me for the most part, you know. And I totally feel you there on the the subconscious side, like the nervous system, all the pull. I didn't have Facebook, I think, until I was at the US team, and I was never really on it. And I feel that even in my day-to-day, like the mental frying of the notifications on my phone, and you know, I'm a busy guy. I'm in the NHL trying to, you know, do my thing. I do get a lot of people that reach out, and I'm grateful for it. I love the attention and interacting with great people, but it takes from other things.
Totally. Yeah.
And I feel for the kids, you know, and that is a lot on their plate.
Yeah.
It is a lot on their plate. And I hope that, you know, I hope that you're doing great work introducing the breath work and, you know, the physical, mental checking in. I think that's so helpful at that age. And it's very much one of those things that now when I make progress, I think to myself, like, how many situations when I was 16, 17, 18, could I have used this? You know, what a gift this would be if I could go back and hand myself the tools that I have now.
Yeah.
But,
I have a cute story for you, and then I have to go because I actually have to get my son to hockey.
Yeah. Don't stay a second longer than you have to.
We gotta go to Cujo. But you know, we were at a hockey tournament this year. I think it was in Montreal for Will's team. Chicago Fire.
Yeah. You hear that? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I go in before the game and just do like a little activation with the team. And I do the belly chest breathing. I do the eye exercise, and I explain it. I was like, you know, your right brain is for like your creative things. So, you know, like Wayne Gretzky, if you watch him play, he was just like the most creative hockey player, right? And I explain it to that so the kids understand. And like the left brain is like what you do in your practice, your skills and your drills. Like you're going to remember what your coach told you. And your front brain is your thinking, like your ability to react and you know, non-react. And so we talk about all the different parts of the brain and what we're doing, and I rehearse this like every single time. So like within 32 games, they might understand it, right? Yeah. To the point that at the end, I would always go have a beer, of course, because that's what I do. I have my beer, and the coach sends me a photo from the dressing room. Like they didn't call me down yet. And I was like, why aren't they calling me down to do the pregame? And he sends me a video of my son leading the Joga session, the belly chest breathing. All the little hockey players are sitting under their little spot, and they have their eyes closed. They've got their right hand on their belly and their left on their chest, and they're doing the breathing. And they're like, we've replaced Joga with Woga. I was like, my son's name as well. I was like, this is amazing. That's awesome. Like career highlight.
And the marketing side is just like, oh, woke culture, Woga. I get it. It's gonna family business. It's gonna work. It's genius.
But just like to your point of making impact in youth sport, like it like these kids need it. Like out of everything that I was talking about, it was the breathing that they remembered, right? So
that's awesome. Yeah. Well, and let's not keep you, Jana. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Super awesome conversation. Where can people find you on Instagram if they want to know more about Joga and yourself?
So yeah, Joga Jana and jogaworld.com.
Joga Jana, done.
Yeah, Joga Jana, awesome. It's easy. Yeah. Thank you
Easy.
so much,
Awesome.
you guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Run.
We'll chat soon.
I know
Okay,
I know
bye-bye.
you got to go. Bye. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Jana for her time. I'm hoping her son isn't sitting there outside a rink like I was when mom or dad forgot to come grab me from hockey practice. It happens. Hockey moms and dads, I know they'll be okay. But awesome podcast today with Jana Webb. I think that such a authentic person, and I think the connection was particularly strong in this one. I always try to share the story with my guests, try and come out with a couple key points that both you, the listener, can take and try and integrate in your life, and that I try and download and bring into mine. But just the connection, particularly from an emotional standpoint, was really strong today, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of. And then in terms of the takeaways for today, there's 3 key points that I really want to touch on. One, I love the free yoga story with Jana. I think that it's a sort of a footprint of who she is and a little bit of a clue into how she operates as a person, just making the best that she could with the resource she had at the time. Her passion. I think that anything you're going to do in life that you're going to be successful at, that's going to be sustainable for you to continue to do year in, year out, no matter hell or high water. Jana is deeply passionate about Joga and what she believes it can do for body, mind, and spirit, and that really came through in our time today. And then I also want to touch on, we talk a little bit about, the accident she's been through, the holistic approach that she's been able to take in healing herself and trying to take responsibility for her well-being and really fighting for a quality of life. If you're someone out there that is struggling with your health, there are resources out there. Maybe we have to get, creative and making them accessible to you or more easily integrated into your life. But I really appreciated, Jana going into a little bit about her story that maybe she hadn't, publicly shared before. And with that said, that's all for today's podcast. Thank you for joining Jana and I. Please continue to like, subscribe, comment. Goes a long way for us trying to grow this podcast, trying to continue to evolve in this new endeavor of ours. And thank you again for joining me as we both try to become more curious competitors. We'll see you again next week.